On Mother's Day, while other daughters were handing over bouquets of roses and spa gift cards, my mother handed me an invoice. It was a thick red envelope placed precisely on my dinner plate. Inside was a 12-page spreadsheet totaling exactly $257,450.22. She leaned into the microphone and announced to the entire room of 50 relatives that this was the cost of raising a failure. She demanded repayment. I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply looked at the cents column. 22 cents. That specific number triggered a memory I had buried for 14 years. I took a photo of the bill and sent it to the family group chat. By the next morning, 49 relatives had blocked her. The 50th person was my grandmother, and what she did was far worse than blocking. Before I tell you how a single decimal point destroyed my mother's reputation, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family member who underestimated your worth. The Obsidian is the kind of restaurant where they charge you $5 just to breathe the air conditioning. It is all crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, and waiters who whisper instead of talk. This was the stage my mother Bernice had chosen for her grand performance. It was the annual Mother's Day brunch, an event she treated with more gravity than a presidential inauguration. There were 50 people crammed into the private VIP room. They were mostly members of the church board, distant cousins we only saw at funerals, and a few of her social climbing friends she was desperate to impress. I sat at the far end of the table, squeezed between a decorative fern and a waiter station. This was standard procedure. In the geography of my family, I was always placed on the outskirts. Across the room, sitting at the head of the table like royalty, was my younger sister Tanisha and her husband Kyle. Tanisha was draped in a sequined dress that caught every flicker of light, laughing loudly at jokes that were not funny. Kyle, the man who had never held a job for longer than 6 months, was swirling a glass of vintage champagne that I knew he could not afford. They were the golden couple. The success story. I was Jasmine, the 32-year-old risk auditor who lived in a rented apartment and drove a sedan. Or at least, that is what I let them believe. My profession is finding things people want to hide. I analyze financial risks for Fortune 500 companies. I track down embezzlers. I find the rot inside corporate structures. But to my mother, I was just the daughter who was too practical, too boring, and decidedly ungrateful. Bernice tapped her spoon against her glass. The sharp ring silenced the room. She stood up, smoothing down her silk dress. She loved this moment. She loved the attention. She began her speech, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. She spoke about the sacrifices of motherhood. She spoke about the long nights, the stretched budgets, the endless giving. She pointed to Tanisha and smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. She said Tanisha was the reward for her labor, a daughter who understood the value of family and image. Then her gaze shifted to me. The warmth evaporated from her face instantly. It was like watching a door slam shut. She gestured for me to come to the front of the room. My stomach tightened, but I pushed back my chair and walked toward her. My heels clicked against the marble floor, the only sound in the silent room. When I reached her, she did not hug me. Instead, she reached into her designer bag and pulled out the red envelope. It was heavy. She shoved it into my hands. She spoke into the microphone, her voice amplified so that even the kitchen staff could hear. She said that since she was looking to retire soon, she needed to settle her accounts. She said that while Tanisha had married well and gifted her a Mercedes, I had provided nothing but burden. She said it was time for me to reimburse the family for the investment that yielded no return. The room gasped. I opened the envelope. My hands did not shake. I pulled out the papers. It was an Excel spreadsheet. It was meticulous. It was insane. Line 1 diaper cost $19.92. Line 2 formula. Line 5 orthodontic braces $19.98. It went on and on. She had listed the cost of public school lunches, even though I knew for a fact I qualified for free lunch programs. She had listed the gas money she spent driving me to the library. She had charged interest. The final page had a bold double underlined total, $257,450.22. Kyle laughed. It was a sharp barking sound. He leaned back in his chair looking smug. He grabbed the microphone from the table and said that it was only fair. He said that he and Tanisha had done their part with the new car, so I should at least pay back the principal loan of my existence. He looked around the room for approval, and a few of my aunts nodded, muttering about how kids these days were so entitled. I stood there holding the evidence of my mother's pettiness. But as I stared at that final number, my forensic brain took over. The anger detached, replaced by cold analysis. In my line of work, we look for patterns. We look for numbers that do not fit. And this number specifically, the 22 cents, fit too perfectly. It was not a random sum of grocery bills and gas receipts. It was a specific figure I had seen once before years ago in a dusty ledger in my grandfather's home office before he passed. It was a number associated with a trust fund. A trust fund my mother told me never existed because Grandpa died bankrupt. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating with the scent of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. My mother was waiting for me to cry. She was waiting for me to beg for forgiveness or make a scene so she could play the victim. She wanted me to scream so she could look at her friends and say, "See, I told you she was unstable." But I did not give her that satisfaction. I looked up from the paper. I looked directly into her eyes. They were challenging, hard, and completely devoid of love. She thought she had checkmated me. She thought this public shaming would force me into submission, force me to sign over my future checks to fund her lifestyle. I slowly folded the spreadsheet and placed it back into the red envelope. I tucked it under my arm. I picked up the microphone she had left on the podium. The feedback whined for a split second. I spoke clearly, my voice steady and low. I said, "Very well. If you want this to be a transaction, we will treat it like a transaction. You want to be reimbursed for the cost of raising me? I accept the invoice." I turned to look at Kyle and Tanisha. Tanisha stopped smiling. She looked confused by my calmness. I looked back at the crowd of 50 relatives who were watching me with a mix of pity and judgment. Then I turned back to my mother. I told her that I would pay her. I would pay her exactly what was owed down to the last penny. But I told her that when you demand a full audit, you have to be prepared for what the auditor finds. I dropped the microphone on the table. It made a loud thud that made everyone jump. I turned and walked out of the obsidian. I did not look back. As I waited for the valet to bring my car, I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app, not to transfer money, but to access a secure database I used for work. I typed in my mother's name. I typed in Tanisha's name. And then I typed in the number, 257450.22. The system began to search. I watched the loading circle spin. When the results popped up, a cold smile touched my lips. The game was on. My mother wanted her money. She was going to get something much more valuable. She was going to get the truth. And it was going to cost her everything. The moment the heavy glass doors of the obsidian closed behind me, the silence should have been a relief. But my phone was already vibrating against my thigh like a trapped insect. It started with a single buzz, then a double, and within seconds it was a continuous, angry hum. I did not look at it immediately. I handed my valet ticket to the attendant, keeping my face perfectly neutral. Inside, my heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs that felt dangerous, but outside I was stone. I finally pulled the phone from my purse as I waited for my sedan. The screen was lit up with notifications. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. The family group chat titled Harris Family Love was exploding. My mother, the consummate performer, had not just announced my debt to the room, she had live-streamed it. I saw the thumbnail of the video on my timeline. It showed her wiping a tear from her cheek while holding the invoice, looking like a martyr in designer silk. The caption read, "When you give your life to a child and they repay you with coldness, prayers needed for my broken heart." The comments were already rolling in, mostly from relatives who had not spoken to me in a decade but felt entitled to an opinion now. Aunt Sheila, who borrowed $500 from me 3 years ago and never paid it back, wrote, "I always knew Jasmine had a spirit of rebellion. You did your best, Bernice." Cousin Marcus, who was currently on probation, commented, "That is messed up. Family is family. Pay your mama Jazz." The messages were a tidal wave of guilt, religious manipulation, and unsolicited advice. I got into my car, a sensible 4-year-old Honda Accord. It was part of the camouflage. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, but it lit up again. This time it was a voice note from Kyle. I connected the phone to the car's Bluetooth and played it as I pulled out into traffic. Kyle's voice filled the cabin, slurring slightly likely from the champagne I knew he could not afford. "Jasmine, look, you need to stop acting like a victim," he said. His tone was patronizing, the kind of voice a man uses when he thinks he is the smartest person in the room. "We know you are hoarding money. Mom is stressed. If you do not have the cash by Monday, I am talking to my lawyer friends. There are laws about elder neglect, Jasmine. Financial abandonment. We will sue you for emotional distress and garnish your wages. Do not make us do it. We just want what is fair." Elder neglect. My mother was 58 years old, played tennis 3 times a week, and drove a leased luxury car. But logic had no place in their narrative. They were building a case against me in the court of public opinion, and now apparently they were threatening actual court. I did not reply. I simply turned off the notifications, merging onto the highway. Most people in my family thought I lived in a cramped studio apartment on the edge of the city near the industrial district. That was the address I put on Christmas cards. That was where I met them if they ever insisted on visiting, usually at a coffee shop nearby, so they never saw the inside. But I did not take the exit for the industrial district. I stayed on the highway, heading toward the skyline that glittered against the twilight sky. I drove toward the financial center where the buildings were tall glass and intimidating. I pulled up to the service entrance of the Pinnacle, the most exclusive residential high-rise in the city. The valet here did not look at my Honda with disdain. He knew exactly who I was. "Good evening, Ms. Harris," he said, opening my door. The usual spot, I nodded, handing him the keys. I walked past the concierge, who greeted me by name, and stepped into the private elevator. I pressed the button for the 45th floor. As the elevator rose, my ears popped. I watched the numbers climb, and with every floor I felt the heavy, suffocating blanket of my family's toxicity begin to lift. The doors opened directly into my penthouse. It was a world away from my mother's house. There were no floral prints, no dusty knickknacks, no noise. It was all sleek lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the quiet hum of high-end climate control. This was what I had built. This was where the money my mother thought I did not have actually went. I kicked off my heels and walked straight to my home office. This room was the nerve center of my life. It looked more like a NASA control room than a study. 3 curved monitors sat atop a mahogany desk. A dedicated server hummed in the corner, protected by biometric security. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and placed the red envelope on the desk. Next to it, I placed my phone, which was still silently lighting up with hate mail. I woke up my computer. The screens glowed with a cool blue light. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to go to work. I was not Jasmine, the daughter, anymore. I was Jasmine Harris, Senior Forensic Risk Auditor. I opened my proprietary software, a program designed to scrape public records, credit bureaus, and hidden financial assets. It was the same tool I used to catch CEOs funneling millions into offshore accounts. I started with the basics. I typed in Bernice Harris, social security number, date of birth. The system processed for a few seconds before populating the first screen. I expected to see some debt. My mother always lived slightly above her means. But what I saw made me lean closer to the screen. The numbers were bleeding red. Her credit score was in the low 400s. The house I grew up in, the one she claimed was her castle, had 3 mortgages on it. The most recent one was a high-interest predatory loan taken out 6 months ago. She was 4 months behind on payments. Notice of default filed 2 weeks ago. Foreclosure proceedings were scheduled to begin in 10 days. I moved to Tanisha, the golden child, the successful influencer. Her profile was even worse. The business entity for her cosmetics line, Tanisha Glow, was listed as inactive by the state because she had failed to pay her taxes for 2 years. There were 5 pending lawsuits against her from customers claiming chemical burns. And the Mercedes she had gifted Mom. It was a lease under a shell company that Kyle had set up. The status read, repossession order active. They were hiding the car in a neighbor's garage. I saw the location data from the tracker the bank had activated. Then I pulled up Kyle, the entrepreneur, the man who threatened to sue me. His profile was a disaster zone of maxed out credit cards and gambling debts. He had $50,000 in losses on a crypto exchange platform that had crashed last month. But the most interesting part was a notification from his employer's internal payroll system, which I could access because his company used a vendor I audited last year. Kyle wasn't just broke. He was under internal investigation for misappropriating petty cash. He needed to pay it back by Monday morning, or they were going to call the police. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitors illuminating my face. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with a satisfying snap. The urgency, the public shaming, the invoice for $257,000. It wasn't about the past, it wasn't about teaching me a lesson or reimbursement for diaper money. They were drowning. The water was already over their heads and they needed a life raft. I was the life raft. They needed exactly $250,000 to stop the foreclosure on the house and keep Kyle out of prison. They didn't want my money to retire. They wanted my money to survive the hole they had dug for themselves. My phone lit up again. Another text from my mother. It read, I am praying for your soul, Jasmine. Please do the right thing before it is too late. God watches everything. I looked at the foreclosure notice on my screen. I looked at Kyle's criminal investigation file. I looked at Tanisha's lawsuits. My mother was right about one thing. Someone was watching. But it wasn't God. It was me. And I had the receipts. I reached for the red envelope and pulled out the spreadsheet again. I looked at the total. $257,000. I realized then that I wasn't just looking at a bill. I was looking at a confession. They had projected their desperation onto me, hoping I would be too shamed, too weak, or too stupid to ask questions. They thought they were shearing a sheep. They did not realize they had just walked into a cage with a wolf. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in years. It rang twice. Hello? A crisp, elderly voice answered. It was the head nurse at the Golden Horizon nursing home. This is Jasmine Harris. I said, my voice steady. I need to schedule a visitation for tomorrow morning. I need to see my grandmother, Vivian. There was a pause on the line. Oh, honey, the nurse said, her voice dropping to a whisper. We have been waiting for you to call. Your grandmother saw the live stream. She has been wheeling herself up and down the hallway demanding to see her attorney. She says she remembers where the ledger is. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes. Tell her to get a good night's sleep, I said. We have a lot of work to do. I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the city lights below. My family wanted a war. They wanted to drag me through the mud. They had no idea that I owned the mud. I turned back to my screens. I wasn't done yet. I needed to print everything. Monday was going to be a very interesting day. My apartment was silent except for the low hum of the server cooling fans. On the screen, the digital lives of my family were being dismantled bite by bite. I took a sip of black coffee and cracked my knuckles. It was time to look behind the curtain of Tanisha's perfect life. My sister had built her entire brand on being a self-made beauty mogul. Her Instagram bio boasted CEO of Tanisha Glow and listed her as a Forbes 30 Under 30 nominee, a nomination I knew she had paid a PR firm to fabricate. I pulled up the corporate filings for Tanisha Glow, LLC. The first red flag was the registered agent address. It was not a sleek office in the fashion district. It was a mailbox inside a shipping store next to a laundromat. I drilled deeper into the financials. The company bank account had a balance of $400.12. For a business that claimed to be shipping thousands of units a week, the cash flow was non-existent. Then I found the lawsuits. They were not just small claims court disputes. These were class action filings. I opened a PDF of a complaint filed 3 weeks ago in federal court. The plaintiffs were 50 women claiming that Tanisha's Miracle Night Cream caused severe chemical burns and permanent scarring. I scrolled through the attached evidence photos. They were horrifying. Red inflamed skin, blisters. Tanisha wasn't selling luxury skincare. She was buying cheap, unregulated industrial filler from an overseas supplier, slapping a gold label on it, and selling it for $80 a jar. The FDA had already sent 2 cease and desist letters. She had ignored both. I minimized the lawsuit window and typed in the license plate of the Mercedes G-Wagon she had gifted our mother. Tanisha had made a huge spectacle of the surprise reveal video, crying about how she wanted to spoil the woman who raised her. The database search returned a hit immediately. The car was not purchased. It was not even leased. It was a daily rental from a company called Exotic Flex Rentals. The daily rate was $499. The rental agreement was in Kyle's name, and the credit card on file had been declined yesterday. They were driving a stolen rental car to a brunch where they called me a failure. I shifted my focus to Kyle. My brother-in-law liked to present himself as a venture capitalist and crypto visionary. In reality, he was a mid-level procurement manager for a logistics firm. I accessed his personal trading accounts using a backdoor tracing algorithm I developed for asset recovery. The graph on the screen looked like a cliff dive. 6 weeks ago, Kyle had transferred $50,000 into a decentralized wallet. He had bet everything on a new cryptocurrency called Moonrise Alpha. I checked the coin's status. It was a classic rug pull scam. The developers had vanished with everyone's money 3 days after launch. The value of Kyle's $50,000 was now 0.001 cents. But the question remained. Where did Kyle get $50,000 to gamble with? He and Tanisha were drowning in debt. They could barely afford their rent, let alone a high-stakes crypto bet. I opened a second monitor and accessed the vendor portal for his employer, Apex Logistics. Because I had audited Apex 2 years ago, I knew their billing codes. I searched for invoices approved by Kyle in the last 2 months. There it was. A series of payments to a shell company called KT Consulting. The invoices were for consulting services and strategic planning. The total amount embezzled over 6 months was exactly $215,000. He had been siphoning money from his company to fund their fake lifestyle and his gambling addiction. I checked the Apex Logistics corporate calendar. My heart stopped for a second. Scheduled for this coming Monday at 9 in the morning was a quarterly external audit. The auditors would see these fake invoices immediately. Kyle was not just broke, he was roughly 48 hours away from being arrested for corporate embezzlement and wire fraud. I sat back, the leather of my chair creaking. The full picture finally came into focus. The $257,000 bill they gave me wasn't about the cost of raising me. It wasn't about diaper money or resentment. It was a ransom note. They needed roughly $250,000 to pay back Apex Logistics and cover Tanisha's immediate legal fees before Monday morning. If they didn't get the money, Kyle would go to prison and Tanisha would be exposed as a fraud. They were willing to destroy my financial future, publicly shame me, and guilt-trip me into bankruptcy just to cover up their crimes. They viewed me as nothing more than an insurance policy they could cash in. The cruelty was functional. It was a calculated, desperate attempt to survive. Just as I was about to print the evidence, the landline on my desk rang. I stared at it. Nobody had that number except for emergencies. It was nearly midnight. I picked up the receiver. "Hello, Ms. Harris." The voice was soft but urgent. It was the night shift head nurse at Golden Horizon. "This is Nurse Betty. I am so sorry to call so late, but your grandmother, Miss Vivian, is insisting we call you. She is very agitated. Is she okay? Is it her heart? I asked, already reaching for my car keys. No, she is physically fine, the nurse said. But she saw the video of your mother. She has been awake for hours. She told me to tell you that she remembers what I asked, freezing with my hand on the doorknob. The nurse paused and I could hear rustling in the background. She says she remembers where the ledger is. She said to tell you that the numbers in the wall are the key. Does that mean anything to you? A chill went down my spine. The numbers in the wall. It was something my grandfather used to say when he taught me how to hide valuables. I realized then that my grandmother wasn't just a sweet old lady in a nursing home. She was the keeper of the family's true history. Tell her I am coming, I said. Tell her I will be there in 20 minutes. And Betty, do not let my mother or anyone else in to see her. I hung up the phone. I grabbed a flash drive and downloaded every file I had just found on Tanisha and Kyle. I put the red envelope with the Mother's Day bill into my bag. The digital evidence was damning, but to truly bury them, I needed the physical proof from the past. I needed the ledger. I walked out of my penthouse and into the night. The hunter had become the hunted, but they didn't know I was bringing an army. And that army was an 80-year-old woman in a wheelchair who had just decided to go to war. Golden Horizon looked less like a nursing home and more like a resort for people who had simply grown tired of the world. The driveway was lined with manicured cypress trees, and the lobby smelled of fresh lavender and expensive floor wax. It was quiet, the kind of heavy, expensive silence that money buys. I walked past the front desk, flashing my ID to the night nurse who had called me. She nodded solemnly and buzzed me through the secure double doors. My heels sank into the plush carpet as I walked down the dim hallway to room 304. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a strange sense of anticipation. I had not seen my grandmother Vivian in 6 months. My mother Bernice had made it very difficult. She controlled the visitation list, claiming that Grandma was too frail, too confused, or too tired to see visitors. I had believed her. That was my mistake. I had believed a woman who viewed truth as a suggestion rather than a rule. I pushed open the heavy oak door. The room was illuminated only by the soft glow of a reading lamp. Sitting by the window in her motorized wheelchair was Grandma V. She was not sleeping. She was not confused. She was sitting upright, dressed in a silk robe, staring out at the city lights with the posture of a queen in exile. When she heard the door close, she turned her chair around. Her eyes, sharp and clear, locked onto mine. There was no dementia in that gaze. There was only fury and focus. "Come here, child," she said. Her voice was not weak. It had the same steel backbone I remembered from my childhood. I walked over and knelt beside her chair. She took my face in her hands. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was strong. "I saw what she did to you," Grandma whispered. One of the aides showed me the video on her phone. Bernice, my own daughter. She stood there in her fancy dress and tried to sell you to the wolves. "I am okay, Grandma," I said, trying to soothe her. "I have it handled." "No, you do not have it handled," she snapped, cutting me off. "You are playing defense. I need you to play offense." She let go of my face and reached into the pocket of her robe. She pulled out a small, old-fashioned key on a brass chain. "She told you your grandfather died bankrupt, didn't she?" she asked. I nodded. Mom said the business had failed in the last few years. She said there was nothing left but debt. That is why I had to take out student loans. That is why I worked 2 jobs through college. Grandma V let out a short, bitter laugh. "Your grandfather was many things, Jasmine, but he was not a fool, and he certainly was not poor. He knew Bernice. He knew she had a hole in her soul that no amount of money could fill. She always wanted more. More clothes. More status. More applause." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "When you turned 18 a week before your grandfather passed, he set up a trust fund. It was an educational trust meant for you. He deposited the profits from the sale of his commercial warehouse properties into it. He wanted you to go to Harvard or Yale without worrying about the cost. He wanted you to be free. I felt the air leave my lungs. A trust fund? I asked, my voice trembling. Yes, Grandma said. But Bernice was the executor. She was the legal guardian until the paperwork was finalized. She told the lawyers that the estate needed liquidity to pay off imaginary creditors. She forged documents. She moved the money. She told you there was nothing, and then she spent the next 14 years spending your future on her vanity. I sat back on my heels, the room spinning slightly. All those years I ate instant noodles. All those nights I cried because I could not afford textbooks. My mother had been wearing my tuition on her wrist in the form of gold bracelets. Do you know how much was in that account? Jasmine Grandma asked. I looked at her. I already knew, but I needed to hear her say it. $257,450.22, she said. Every penny. The number hung in the air between us. It was the exact amount on the invoice. My mother's subconscious guilt had tracked the theft down to the decimal point. She had projected her own crime onto me, demanding I pay back the exact sum she had stolen. It was twisted. It was pathological. I have the digital trail, Grandma, I said, my voice hardening. I found it tonight. I can prove the money moved. Digital is good, Grandma said, shaking her head. But digital can be argued. They will say it was a loan. They will say it was for family expenses. They will say the computer made a mistake. If you want to bury them, Jasmine, if you want to make sure they never climb out of the hole they dug, you need the original ledger. The ledger I asked. Your grandfather kept a handwritten record of everything she explained, every deposit, every intent, and most importantly, he wrote a letter. A letter to you explaining the trust, dated and signed 2 days before he died. Bernice thinks she destroyed it. She thinks she burned everything. Where is it? I asked. Grandma smiled, and for the first time she looked like the mischievous woman who used to sneak me candy before dinner. Bernice is so busy looking at herself in the mirror, she never looks at the walls. In the old house in the library, behind the portrait of the 2 dogs, there is a wall safe. Bernice thinks she had it drilled out and emptied years ago. She did. But she didn't know about the false bottom. I stared at her. A false bottom. Your grandfather didn't trust banks, and by the end he didn't trust his daughter, Grandma said. The letter and the original bank certificates are under the felt lining of the safe. You need to go there. You need to get them. But the house is full of them, I said. Kyle and Tanisha are practically living there now. Bernice never leaves. Then you have to be smarter than them, Grandma said, placing the brass key in my hand. It was cold and heavy. This key opens the false bottom. You go there. You get what belongs to you. And then you bring it to church on Sunday. She gripped my hand one last time. She took your money. She took your peace. She tried to take your dignity. We are going to take back everything plus interest. Now go, before they realize the wolf is at the door. I stood up, closing my hand around the key. I kissed my grandmother on the forehead. She smelled of lavender and vengeance. I walked out of the room, down the silent hallway, and out into the cool night air. The sadness was gone. The confusion was gone. I had a mission. I had a key. And I was going back to the house where I grew up, the house that was bought with my stolen future, to tear it down from the inside out. The drive to my childhood home felt like traveling backward in time, but not to a happier era. I turned onto the tree-lined street, where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives. The house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, a sprawling 2-story colonial that projected stability and wealth. From the curb, it looked perfect. The white pillars were spotless, and the azaleas were in full bloom. But I knew better. I knew that behind those heavy oak doors the foundation was rotting, eaten away by secrets and debt. I parked my sedan behind Tanisha's rental Mercedes, which I noticed was parked at a strange angle, as if the driver had been in a rush or perhaps intoxicated. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I had texted my mother an hour ago, telling her I was coming over to discuss a payment plan for the invoice. I knew that would work. The promise of money was the only thing that could make Bernice pause her histrionics. To her, I was not a daughter coming to visit. I was a walking checkbook coming to capitulate. I unlocked the front door with my old key. I expected a confrontation the moment I stepped inside, but instead I walked into a wall of noise. The house sounded like a stock trading floor during a crash. Bernice was pacing in the formal dining room, the phone pressed to her ear. She was wearing a silk caftan, but her hair was disheveled, and her voice was shrill. "You cannot speak to me like that," she screamed into the receiver. "Do you know who my family is? We have been customers of your bank for 30 years. I am telling you, the transfer is pending. It is a technical error on your end. If you send one more letter about foreclosure, I will sue you for harassment." She was lying. There was no transfer pending. She was trying to bully a minimum wage bank employee into delaying the inevitable. She glanced at me as I walked in, but she didn't hang up. She just held up a finger signaling me to wait, as if I were a servant interrupting a royal decree. In the living room, the scene was equally chaotic. Tanisha was sprawled on the beige sofa surrounded by shopping bags from high-end boutiques. But she wasn't unboxing them. She was frantically shoving clothes back into them. Her face was streaked with mascara tears. They declined it. She sobbed into her phone, presumably talking to one of her vapid friends. The card was declined at Saks Keisha. It was so embarrassing. The cashier cut it up right in front of me. I told her it was fraud protection, but everyone was staring. "I need you to lend me $2,000. Just until Tuesday." She didn't even look up when I walked past the archway. They were both so consumed by their own financial implosion that I was invisible. It was perfect. I didn't have to make small talk. I didn't have to pretend to care. I just nodded at my mother, gestured toward the kitchen, as if I were getting a glass of water, and slipped into the hallway. My heart began to hammer against my ribs as I moved toward the back of the house. I was heading for my grandfather's old library. When he was alive, that room smelled of old paper pipe tobacco and lemon polish. It was a sanctuary of wisdom. But as I approached the door now, I heard the aggressive synthetic sounds of a video game. Gunshots, explosions, screaming zombies. I pushed the door open quietly. The transformation was nauseating. The floor-to-ceiling bookshelves were still there, but they were cluttered with empty energy drink cans and Funko Pop figures. The antique mahogany desk had been shoved into a corner to make room for a massive multi-screen gaming setup. Neon blue LED strips lined the crown molding, casting a sickly, sterile glow over the room. The air smelled of stale corn chips and neglect. This was Kyle's domain now. The chair was empty. The game was paused on the screen. I scanned the room quickly. My grandmother had been specific. Behind the painting of the two hunting dogs, I spotted the painting on the far wall hanging slightly crooked. It was an oil painting of two English pointers that Grandpa had loved. I walked over to it, my footsteps silent on the rug. I grabbed the heavy gold frame and swung it away from the wall. My stomach dropped. The wall safe was there, but the dial had been drilled out. The metal door hung open, exposing the dark, empty cavity inside. I reached in my fingers, frantically searching for the false bottom Grandma had described. I felt the felt lining. I dug my fingernails into the edge and pried it up. Nothing. It was completely empty. No ledger, no letter from Grandpa, no bank certificates. Just a hollow metal box. I felt a wave of cold panic wash over me. Grandma was sure it was here. Had Bernice found it years ago? Had she destroyed it? If the ledger was gone, my leverage was gone. I could prove the money was missing digitally, but I couldn't prove the intent. I couldn't prove the trust fund was explicitly for me without Grandpa's handwritten instructions. I stood there staring into the empty safe, my mind racing to find a plan B. Looking for this. The voice came from the doorway. It was smug, oily, and terrifyingly calm. I spun around. Kyle was leaning against the doorframe. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that was too tight, holding a can of beer in one hand. In the other hand, he held a thick, leather-bound book, the ledger. He didn't look like the bumbling, incompetent failure I had researched the night before. In the neon blue light of the gaming room, he looked dangerous. He looked like a man who had been cornered and had finally found a weapon. I straightened my spine, forcing my face into a mask of indifference. "Hello, Kyle. I see you have been doing some unauthorized renovations." He chuckled, stepping into the room and kicking the door shut behind him with his heel. The lock clicked. The sound was loud in the small room. "Don't play the high and mighty executive with me, Jasmine," he said, walking over to his gaming chair and sitting down. He placed the ledger on his lap, tapping the cover with his index finger. "I know what this is, and I know why you are here. The old lady at the nursing home talked, didn't she?" He took a sip of his beer, watching me. "I found this 3 months ago. I was looking for cash. Bernice said the old man hid money in the walls. I didn't find cash, but I found this book. Interesting reading, very detailed." "Give it to me, Kyle," I said, extending my hand. "It doesn't belong to you." He laughed again, shaking his head. "You think I'm stupid, don't you? You think I'm just Tanisha's loser husband? But I know how to read a balance sheet, Jazz. I read the letter from your grandpa tucked inside here. $257,000. Stolen by your mommy dearest." He stood up and walked toward me, stopping just outside of arm's reach. "This book is proof that Bernice is a thief. It is proof that Tanisha has been living on your money her whole life. If you take this to the police, Bernice goes to jail. Tanisha loses everything." "That is going to happen anyway, Kyle," I said coldly. "I know about the embezzlement at your job. I know about the fake crypto investments. You are going down regardless of this book." His face twitched. The smugness faltered for a second, replaced by a flash of genuine fear, but he covered it up quickly with anger. "That is why we are going to make a deal," he hissed. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded document. He tossed it onto the desk next to me. "Sign it," he commanded. I looked down at the paper. It was a transfer of deed, a quitclaim deed. "Grandpa left you that plot of land out past the county line," Kyle said. "The swampland. You never did anything with it. But I have a buddy in real estate development. He says the city is expanding that way. He says a developer wants to buy that land for a strip mall." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The offer is on the table. $3 million. But the deed is in your name because of the trust. So here is the deal, Jasmine. You sign this paper transferring the land to Tanisha. We sell it. We pay off my debts, we pay off the house, and we live happily ever after. You do that and I give you this book. You can put Bernice in jail for all I care. I just need the money." "And if I don't?" I asked, meeting his gaze. He held up the ledger. He pulled a lighter from his pocket and flicked it on. The flame danced inches from the brittle yellowed pages of my grandfather's legacy. "Then I burn it," he said, his eyes dead serious. "I burn the proof. I burn the letter. And then I call the police and tell them you broke into my house and tried to assault me. Who are they going to believe, the successful family man or the bitter estranged daughter who trespasses?" I looked at the flame. I looked at the ledger. I looked at the deed. I knew the land he was talking about. Grandpa called it the mud patch. I thought it was worthless. Kyle obviously thought it was his golden ticket, but he didn't know I was recording this entire conversation. And he certainly didn't know that $3 million was a low-ball offer. I reached for the pen on the desk. "You want a signature, Kyle?" I asked softly. "Yes," he breathed, seeing victory. I picked up the pen. I leaned over the document, but I didn't sign my name. I wrote 2 words in big, bold letters across the signature line. "Try me." I dropped the pen. The look of confusion on his face was worth every penny of the debt. But before he could react, before the flame could touch the paper, a loud crash came from the front of the house, glass breaking, and then sirens. It seemed my mother's call to the bank didn't go as well as she planned. Or maybe, just maybe, I had called for backup before I even walked through the door. The sirens I heard earlier faded into the distance. They were not coming for us. They were just passing by on the main road, a cruel trick of acoustics that had given me a moment of hope. Now the silence returned to the gaming room, heavier and more suffocating than before. Kyle picked up the pen I had dropped. He looked at the words "Try me" scrawled across the signature line of the deed. His face flushed a dark, angry red. You think this is a joke, Jasmine? He spat, stepping closer. You think because you have a fancy job in the city you are untouchable. But you are in my house now, and you are not leaving until you sign this properly. He grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. I didn't struggle. I didn't scream. In my line of work, panic is the enemy. I let him drag me out of the library and into the living room where Tanisha was still sitting amidst her pile of returned designer clothes. What is going on? Tanisha asked, looking up from her phone. Her mascara was smeared, giving her the look of a tragic raccoon. Why are you shouting? Your sister is refusing to help us, Kyle announced, shoving me toward the center of the room like a prisoner of war. I found a buyer for the swamp land. $3 million, Tanisha. $3 million. Enough to pay off your lawsuits, clear my debts, and save this house. And she won't sign the paper. Tanisha's eyes went wide. The tears instantly vanished. 3 million! She repeated the number, rolling off her tongue like honey. She stood up and walked over to me. Jasmine, is that true? You are sitting on $3 million and you are letting Mom get foreclosed on. I smoothed out my blazer, looking at them with disgust. It is not about the money, Tanisha. It is about the fact that Kyle is blackmailing me with evidence of Mom's crimes. He is holding Grandpa's ledger hostage. Tanisha waved her hand dismissively. Who cares about some old book? Jasmine? Mom did what she had to do to survive. You always want to live in the past. We have a crisis right now. Just sign the paper. Why are you being so selfish? Selfish. That was the trigger word in this house. If I kept my own money, I was selfish. If I didn't let them abuse me, I was selfish. Just then, the kitchen door swung open. Bernice marched in. She looked even more frazzled than before. The bank had clearly not given her the answer she wanted. She saw the three of us standing in a triangle of tension. She saw the quitclaim deed in Kyle's hand. She saw the defiance on my face. What is this about $3 million? Bernice asked, her radar for money instantly activating. Kyle explained the deal quickly, painting himself as the hero who had found a solution, and me as the villain standing in the way of the family's salvation. He didn't mention he was going to burn the ledger. He just said I was being difficult. Bernice turned to me. She didn't ask for my side of the story. She didn't ask if I was okay. She crossed her arms and let out a long, disappointed sigh. Jasmine signed the paper, she said. It was a command, not a request. Mom, Kyle is threatening me, I said, testing her one last time. He admits he embezzled money. He admits he stole the ledger. I don't care, Bernice snapped. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I really don't care, Jasmine. Look at this house. Look at your sister. We are on the brink of losing everything. That land has been sitting there for 14 years, growing nothing but weeds. If selling it can save my reputation and your sister's future, then you will sell it. It is the least you can do after all the grief you have caused us today with that stunt at the restaurant. I stared at her. The woman who gave birth to me. She was willing to overlook extortion, theft, and abuse just to keep her leased luxury car and her country club membership. You want me to sell Grandpa's legacy for $3 million? I asked slowly. It is a fair price. Kyle interjected quickly. Too quickly. And that was when my brain, the brain of a forensic auditor, finally made the connection. Kyle had said a developer wanted to build a strip mall, but $3 million for a strip mall location in that specific county was unheard of. The land was marshy, the zoning was agricultural, unless the zoning had changed. I remembered a briefing I had read 2 weeks ago about a massive infrastructure project called the Azure Corridor. The state was planning to build a high-speed transit hub connecting the tech district to the suburbs. They needed land. Lots of it. And they were paying a premium. If Grandpa's land was in the direct path of the Azure Corridor, it wasn't worth $3 million. It was worth $20 million, minimum. Kyle's friend, the developer, wasn't trying to build a mall. He was trying to flip the land to the state for a massive profit. And Kyle, being the amateur he was getting played. He was about to sell a diamond for the price of a cubic zirconia. A cold calm settled over me. They didn't know. They were too busy drowning in their own debt to look at the bigger picture. If I signed that paper, I wouldn't just be losing the land. I would be letting them get cheated, which would be poetic justice, but I would also be losing the only leverage I had to get the ledger back. I needed to stall. I needed to get out of there, verify the zoning maps, and come up with a plan to extract the ledger without giving up the land. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump. I forced tears into my eyes. I made myself look small, defeated. The daughter they wanted to see. I can't think straight, I stammered, my voice trembling. You are all yelling at me. It is too much pressure. Bernice stepped closer, smelling blood in the water. We are not yelling, Jasmine. We are telling you what needs to happen. We are a family. Families make sacrifices. I need time, I whispered. I need to review the tax implications. If I sign this today, the IRS will freeze my accounts. I need to talk to my accountant. Kyle narrowed his eyes. You are stalling. I'm not. I lied. I just don't want to go to jail for tax evasion, Kyle. Unlike you, I care about the law. Give me 3 days. I will talk to my CPA. I will draw up the papers properly. 3 days. Tanisha whined. But I need the money by Tuesday. I can write you a personal check for $5,000 right now to cover your credit card minimums, I offered. Just to buy some time. But I need 3 days on the land deal. The mention of immediate cash made Tanisha's eyes light up. She looked at Kyle. Take it, baby. 5,000 is better than nothing. We can hold off the lawyers until Wednesday. Kyle looked at me, then at the deed, then at Bernice. He knew he was close. He didn't want to push too hard and make me run to the police. He thought he had broken me. Wednesday, Kyle said, pointing a finger in my face. Wednesday at noon. You come back here with the signed deed, or I burn the book, and I burn your reputation. Deal, I said softly. I reached into my purse and pulled out my checkbook. I wrote a check for $5,000. I handed it to Tanisha. She snatched it without a thank you. I turned to leave. Bernice didn't walk me to the door. She was already busy looking at the check over Tanisha's shoulder. As I picked up my purse from the coffee table, I pretended to fumble with the strap. Oops, I muttered, dropping the bag. Keys, lipstick, and a compact mirror spilled onto the rug. So clumsy, Tanisha sneered. I knelt down to gather my things. As I swept my keys back into the bag, my hand brushed against the underside of the coffee table. In one smooth motion, I stuck a small black disc no larger than a quarter onto the wood. It was a military-grade listening device with a 72-hour battery life. I stood up, clutching my bag. I will see you on Wednesday, I said. I walked to the front door. Behind me, I could already hear them celebrating. $3 million, Bernice was saying. We can finally redo the kitchen. I stepped out into the night air. It was crisp and clean. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. I pulled out my phone and opened the surveillance app. I put on my headphones. The audio feed was crystal clear. She is so stupid, I heard Kyle say. My buddy told me the land is actually worth $5 million. We are going to pocket the extra $2 million and not tell her. I started the engine, a dark smile spreading across my face. They thought they were the sharks. They didn't realize they were just bait. I had 3 days, and I was going to use every second of it to destroy them. The audio quality from the device I had planted under my mother's coffee table was military grade. Back in my penthouse, the sound of Kyle's voice filled my home office with crystal clarity. I sat in the dark, sipping herbal tea, listening to them plot my destruction. It was now 2 a.m, just hours after I had left their house. Most people would be asleep, but desperation does not sleep. I heard the sound of ice clinking in a glass. I heard the rustle of paper. Then I heard Kyle's voice, slurring slightly, but filled with a dangerous bravado. We are not waiting until Wednesday, he said. What do you mean? Tanisha asked. Her voice sounded muffled, likely because she was eating something. She promised she would bring the deed on Wednesday. She is stalling. Kyle snapped. I saw the way she looked at the papers. She suspects something. If she talks to a lawyer, or worse, if she checks the zoning maps, the deal is dead. We need to move now. But we need her signature. Tanisha argued. Kyle laughed. It was a dark, ugly sound. I spent the last hour practicing it, he said. Look. I signed the practice sheet. It looks exactly like hers. I am going to notarize it myself using the stamp I stole from the office. I will backdate it. By the time she realizes the land is sold, the money will already be in our offshore account. We will wire the funds to the Caymans, declare bankruptcy here, and disappear. I set my teacup down slowly. My hand was shaking not from fear, but from rage. They weren't just planning to cheat me out of the land value. They were planning to forge my signature, commit felony fraud, and flee the country, leaving me to deal with the legal fallout of a fraudulent land sale. If I waited until Wednesday, the land would already be gone. I needed to disrupt their timeline. I needed to create a chaos so large, so consuming, that Kyle wouldn't have time to drive to the county clerk's office on Monday morning. I needed to take out his support system. I needed to break Tanisha. I pulled up Tanisha's social media schedule. Tomorrow was Sunday. She was hosting a massive meet and greet event called the Sunday Glow Up at a trendy rooftop lounge downtown. It was the official launch party for her new Summer Radiance line, the very same line that was currently burning people's faces off. She had promised gift bags, free makeovers, and a live Q&A session. She was expecting 300 fans. Perfect. I did not go to sleep. I spent the next 4 hours designing a flyer. It had to look professional. It had to look official. On the front, I put a high-resolution photo of Tanisha's face next to a photo of a chemical burn victim from the lawsuit filing. The headline read, "Warning: the toxic truth about Tanisha Glow." On the back, I listed the FDA case number, the chemical composition analysis of her cream, showing high levels of mercury and hydroquinone, and the contact information for the class action lawsuit attorney. I sent the design to a 24-hour print shop that specialized in rush orders. Then I went to a temp agency website and hired 4 brand ambassadors for a Sunday morning gig. Their instructions were simple. Wear black t-shirts that said Truth Squad, stand outside the entrance of the rooftop lounge, and hand a flyer to every single person waiting in line. Sunday morning arrived with bright sunshine, the kind of day that looks great on Instagram. I parked my car across the street from the venue, watching through binoculars. The line wrapped around the block. These were young women, mostly teenagers and college students, who looked up to my sister. They were clutching their purses, excited to meet the woman who claimed to have it all. It made me sick to see how easily they were being manipulated. At 10 in the morning, my team arrived. They were efficient. They started at the back of the line and worked their way forward. I watched as the girls took the flyers. I saw the confusion on their faces, then the shock, then the horror. They pulled out their phones. They started Googling the case numbers listed on the flyer. The energy in the line shifted instantly. The excited chatter died down, replaced by angry whispers. Girls were taking pictures of the flyers and posting them online. The hashtag TanishaGlowToxic started trending locally within 15 minutes. Inside the venue, Tanisha had no idea. I pulled up her live stream on my iPad. She was on stage wearing a white jumpsuit, holding a microphone. She looked radiant, unaware that the ground beneath her feet was dissolving. "Welcome, my beautiful glow-getters," she chirped, flashing her veneered smile. "I am so excited to share my secrets with you. Beauty is pain, but it is worth it." A girl in the front row, who had managed to bring a flyer inside, stood up. She interrupted Tanisha mid-sentence. "Is that why your cream burns our skin?" the girl shouted. "Because it has mercury in it." Tanisha froze. Her smile faltered. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "We don't allow haters in here. Security." But the girl didn't sit down. She threw the flyer onto the stage. It landed at Tanisha's feet. Then another girl stood up. And another. "You are being sued for poisoning people," someone yelled from the back. "I want a refund." "You are a fraud." The live stream chat, which I was monitoring, went nuclear. People were spamming link to the class action lawsuit. Tanisha's face turned a blotchy red. She looked around for Kyle, but he was nowhere to be seen. He was probably at home practicing my signature. She was alone. This is a lie, Tanisha screamed, her poise cracking. My sister put you up to this, didn't she? She is jealous because I am beautiful and she is a nobody. That was the wrong thing to say. The crowd booed. Tanisha, realizing she was losing control, made the fatal mistake of a narcissist. She attacked her audience. "Shut up!" she shrieked into the microphone. "You are all just jealous. Look at you. You are ugly. That is why you need my cream. You are poor and ugly, and you are trying to drag me down. I drive a Mercedes. What do you drive?" The room went silent for a split second, and then the phones came out. Hundreds of them, flashbulbs popping. They were recording the real Tanisha. The mask had fallen off, and underneath was a mean, insecure bully. On the screen, I watched her unravel. She threw the microphone at the DJ booth. She kicked over a display table of her products. Glass jars shattered everywhere. She was screaming profanities, calling her fans losers and peasants. The live stream cut off abruptly as someone on her team finally had the sense to kill the feed. But it was too late. The clips were already circulating on TikTok and Twitter. I refreshed the page. Tanisha's follower count was dropping by the thousands every time I blinked. Sponsors were already issuing statements distancing themselves. I sat back in my car seat, watching the crowd disperse. They were angry. They felt betrayed. Tanisha had not just lost her business, she had lost her shield. Without her public image, she was just a broke woman with a lot of debt and a husband who was about to go to jail. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Kyle. "What did you do?" I didn't reply. I simply started my car and drove away. One domino had fallen. Now Kyle was isolated. He was panicked. And a panicked man makes mistakes. He wouldn't be able to focus on forging my signature now. He would be too busy trying to stop his wife from burning down the rest of their life. I had bought myself some time, but the war wasn't over. It was just getting started, and I still had a date with a listening device and a plan to get that ledger back. Monday morning at Sovereign Risk Management was usually a study in controlled chaos. Phones rang with urgent cadence, analysts shouted across the trading floor, and millions of dollars moved through fiber optic cables every second. But inside my glass-walled office on the 40th floor, it was quiet. I was sipping my green tea, watching the fallout of Tanisha's Sunday disaster on my third monitor. Her brand stock, which was really just a valuation based on social sentiment, had flatlined. The class action lawsuit I had helped anonymously promote was trending on Twitter. I felt a small, cold sense of satisfaction, but I knew the beast would not go down without a fight. The beast in this case was my mother. At 10:15, my desk phone blinked. It was Sarah, the receptionist in the main lobby downstairs. Her voice was tight, bordering on panic. "Ms. Harris," she whispered, "there is a woman down here. She says she is your mother. She is demanding to see the managing partner. She is screaming, 'Jasmine, security is about to get involved.'" I sighed, setting my tea down. "Send her up, Sarah," I said calmly. "And tell Mr. Sterling I need him in conference room B. Tell him it is regarding the personnel security protocol we discussed." I adjusted my blazer and walked to the elevator banks. I knew exactly what Bernice was doing. She was using the nuclear option. In her mind, if I destroyed Tanisha's career, she was going to destroy mine. She assumed that because she could bully me at the dinner table, she could bully me in a boardroom. She had no idea that in this building I was not the scapegoat daughter. I was the huntress. When the elevator doors opened, Bernice stormed out like a hurricane in a Chanel knockoff suit. She was holding an oversized handbag and wearing sunglasses indoors, trying to look like a celebrity facing the paparazzi. But up close, she just looked manic. Her makeup was a little too heavy, hiding the stress lines from a weekend of panic. "Where is he?" she demanded, ignoring me completely and addressing the nearest intern. "I want to speak to the CEO. I want to report a crime." I stepped into her path. "Hello, Mother." She whipped around, pulling her sunglasses down to glare at me. "You," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger in my face. "You ungrateful, jealous little witch. You ruined your sister's launch. You hired those actors. Do not try to deny it. I did not deny it. I simply checked my watch. You are causing a scene, Mother. If you want to talk, come into the conference room. No, she screamed, her voice echoing off the marble walls. I am not going into a back room with you. I want everyone to hear this. She turned to the open plan office where 50 analysts were now staring at her. Listen to me, she shouted, waving her arms. This woman, Jasmine Harris, is a fraud. She is a thief. She stole money from her dying grandmother to buy her fancy clothes. She is on drugs. I found cocaine in her bedroom. She is a liability to this company. The room went deadly silent. I saw Sarah, the receptionist, cover her mouth in horror. My mother was not just lying, she was trying to get me arrested. She was scorched earth personified. Just then, the double doors at the end of the hall opened. Mr. Sterling walked out. He was a man of few words, a 60-year-old titan of industry who had seen market crashes and corporate wars. He walked straight toward us, his face unreadable. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice low and commanding. Bernice puffed up her chest, thinking she had found an ally. Are you the boss? She asked. Good. You need to fire this girl immediately. I am her mother. I am telling you, she is an addict and an embezzler. She is psychologically unstable. If you keep her here, she will steal from you just like she stole from us. Mr. Sterling looked at Bernice. Then he looked at me. He didn't blink. Mrs. Harris, is it? Mr. Sterling asked. Yes, Bernice said, crossing her arms triumphantly. And I expect you to escort her out of the building. Mr. Sterling let out a short, dry chuckle. It wasn't a happy sound. Mrs. Harris, last week, your daughter identified a risk exposure in our Asian markets that would have cost this firm $4 billion. She stayed here for 3 nights straight to close the loophole. She is not a liability. She is the reason this company is solvent this quarter. Bernice's mouth dropped open. She blinked, confused. But she is a failure. She owes me money. Mr. Sterling reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He handed it to Bernice. We have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of our key employees, he said coolly. Jasmine warned us that you might attempt to leverage familial pressure to extort her. This is a preliminary restraining order, barring you from coming within 500 feet of this building or contacting Ms. Harris during business hours. Our legal team filed it this morning. Bernice stared at the paper in her hand as if it were a poisonous snake. Extort, she sputtered. I am her mother, security, Mr. Sterling said, nodding to the 2 guards who had quietly appeared behind her. Please show Mrs. Harris the exit, and ensure her photo is distributed to the front desk. She is banned from the premises. The guards stepped forward, each taking one of Bernice's arms. She tried to shake them off, her dignity crumbling instantly. Get your hands off me, she shrieked. Do you know who I am, Jasmine? Tell them to stop. I stood there, leaning against the glass wall, watching her struggle. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her with the same cold detachment she had shown me for 32 years. As they dragged her toward the elevators, she realized she had lost. And that is when the desperation turned to pure venom. She stopped struggling and locked eyes with me. Fine, she screamed, her voice cracking. You want to use the law? You want to hide behind your boss? Then let's see how you handle the family. The elevator doors pinged open. I am calling a family meeting, she yelled as they pushed her inside. This Sunday, at the church, the whole clan. I am going to cut you out of the family tree, Jasmine. I am going to disown you in front of the altar. You will have no name. You will be nothing. The doors slid shut, cutting off her voice. Silence returned to the office. The analysts went back to their screens, pretending they hadn't just witnessed a soap opera. Mr. Sterling turned to me. Are you all right, Jasmine? He asked. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I am better than all right, sir, I said. She just gave me exactly what I wanted. Mr. Sterling raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. He knew better than to question my methods. He just nodded and walked back to his office. I walked back to my desk and sat down. My hands were steady. My mother thought she was threatening me with that family meeting. She thought excommunication was her ultimate weapon. She didn't realize she had just set the stage for my final act. She was going to gather the entire extended family in one room. She was going to invite the pastor. She was going to invite the community leaders. She was going to create the biggest audience possible to witness my humiliation. Perfect. I pulled out my phone and opened the app connected to the listening device under the coffee table. I checked the battery life, 50%, still recording. I opened my calendar and marked Sunday with a red flag. Then I opened my email and drafted a message to my grandmother's lawyer. Subject: the Sunday service. Body: get everything ready. We are going to church. I hit send. My mother wanted a show. I was going to give her a performance she would never forget. The stage was set, the players were in motion, and I had the one thing Bernice never accounted for. I had the receipts. All of them. The law offices of Henderson and Associates were located in a brownstone building that smelled of old mahogany and expensive cologne. Mr. Henderson had been my grandfather's attorney for 40 years. He was the kind of lawyer who didn't advertise on billboards because his clients were the people who owned the billboards. He sat across from me, his silver eyebrows knitted together as he reviewed the mountain of evidence I had placed on his desk. "This is substantial, Jasmine," he said, his voice grave. He picked up the stack of papers on the left. "These are the bank statements from 14 years ago. We subpoenaed the archives directly from the bank's central storage." I looked at the documents. They were photocopies of microfiche records, grainy but legible. They told a clear, devastating story. On September 12th, 2 days after my grandfather's funeral, a withdrawal of $50,000. On September 15th, another $50,000. By October 1st, the trust fund account balance was zero. And here Mr. Henderson said, pointing to a signature at the bottom of the withdrawal slip, "This is supposed to be your grandfather's authorization, but the date is post-mortem." And the handwriting? "It is my mother's," I said. "She tries to loop her L's like Grandpa did, but she presses too hard on the paper." Mr. Henderson nodded. "It is forgery. It is theft. And because she was acting as a fiduciary, it is a severe breach of trust. The statute of limitations is tricky with fraud, but since you were a minor and the theft was concealed, we have a very strong case to reopen the estate." He moved to the digital evidence. I played the audio recording from the device I had planted under the coffee table. Kyle's voice filled the quiet office, bragging about forging my signature and fleeing to the Cayman Islands. Mr. Henderson took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "That is conspiracy to commit wire fraud and real estate fraud," he muttered, "and he is admitting it on tape. If we hand this to the district attorney, your brother-in-law is looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison." Then we watched the video clips from Tanisha's disastrous event. We watched her scream at her customers. We watched her admit that the product was cheap. We reviewed the lab results, showing the mercury content. "Civil liability nightmare," Mr. Henderson concluded. "She will be bankrupt before the first lawsuit even hits the discovery phase." He leaned back in his leather chair and looked at me. His eyes were kind but serious. "Jasmine, you have enough here to not just win. You have enough to destroy them. If we execute this strategy on Sunday, there is no coming back. Your mother will be humiliated. She will likely face criminal charges. Your sister will be destitute. Your brother-in-law will be incarcerated. Are you sure you want to do this?" I sat there for a long moment. The air conditioner hummed in the background. Was I sure? It is a heavy thing to hold the executioner's axe over your own bloodline. I thought about the easy path. I could just walk away. I could leave them to their mess. I could go back to my penthouse and pretend they didn't exist. But then I thought about the invoice. $257,000. I thought about the way Bernice looked at me when she handed it over, the malice in her eyes. She didn't just want money, she wanted to break me. If I walked away now, they would never learn. They would find another victim. They would keep hurting people. "I am sure, Mr. Henderson," I said softly. "Prepare the paperwork. We serve them on Sunday." I left the office as the sun was setting. The city was bathed in a golden light, but I felt cold. I drove back to my apartment in silence. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the floor of my living room. I reached for a small wooden box on my bookshelf. It was the only thing I had taken from my childhood home when I moved out at 18. Inside was a photograph of my father. He was a quiet man, a gentle man. He worked at the post office for 30 years. He loved gardening, and he loved me, but he was weak. He let Bernice run over him. I remembered the nights he would sit in the kitchen, head in his hands, while Bernice screamed at him for not making enough money to buy her a new car. I remembered how he shrank smaller and smaller every year until he finally just faded away. He died of a heart attack when I was 20, but I knew the truth. Stress killed him. She killed him inch by inch with her demands and her ingratitude. I ran my thumb over his face in the photo. "I am sorry, Dad," I whispered. "I am sorry I couldn't save you. But I promise you she is not going to do to me what she did to you." A tear slid down my cheek. It was the first time I had cried since this whole nightmare started. It wasn't a tear of weakness. It was a release. I let myself feel the grief for 5 minutes. I let myself miss the father who used to sneak me chocolate bars when Mom put me on a diet. I let myself mourn the family I wished I had. Then I wiped my face. I put the photo back in the box. I stood up. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold iron resolve. I picked up my phone. I opened the family group chat. It had been silent since Bernice's outburst at my office, but I knew they were all watching, waiting terrified of what I would do next. I typed the message slowly, making sure every word was calculated to give them false hope. Message to Family Love Group Mother. You win. I am tired of fighting. I have liquidated some assets. I will have the money. I paused, watching the read receipts pop up. Bernice read it instantly. Tanisha read it. Kyle read it. I could almost hear their sighs of relief. I could imagine them high-fiving, thinking their intimidation tactics had worked. I continued typing. But I want to do this properly. Since you humiliated me in public, I want to clear my name in public. I will bring the check to church this Sunday. I want everyone there, the aunts, the uncles, the church elders. I want them to see that I am a good daughter who pays her debts. I hit send. The replies came in immediately. Bernice. Praise God. I knew you would come to your senses, Jasmine. We will be there. First pew. Don't be late. Kyle, smart move, Jas. Bring the deed too. Tanisha, finally. Wear something nice for once. I stared at the screen, a dark smile playing on my lips. They thought they were coming to a coronation. They thought they were coming to collect their winnings. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. I turned off my phone. I went to my closet and picked out my outfit for Sunday. A white suit, sharp, clean, clinical. The arsenal was gathered. The trap was set. Sunday was going to be a day of reckoning, and God help them because I certainly wouldn't. The fellowship hall of the First AME Church was usually reserved for potlucks and choir rehearsals, but today it felt more like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided before the trial began. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee floor wax and the heavy cloying perfume of 50 judgmental relatives. My mother had staged this perfectly. She had not chosen a private room. She had chosen the heart of our community, the place where reputation mattered more than truth. I stood at the back of the room for a moment, watching through the crack in the double doors. The rows of metal folding chairs were filled. Every aunt, uncle, cousin, and second cousin was there. Even the pastor, Reverend Miller, was sitting in the front row, looking solemn and grave. On the small stage, my mother Bernice was giving the performance of a lifetime. She was dressed in a modest black dress devoid of her usual flashy jewelry. She looked smaller, frailer. She was dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, her voice trembling as she spoke into the microphone. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said, her voice cracking with practiced emotion. "A mother's love is unconditional. I gave that girl the clothes off my back. I went without lunch so she could have textbooks. And how does she repay me? With silence, with coldness. She lives in a luxury apartment while her own mother faces foreclosure. It breaks my heart, family. It truly breaks my spirit. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. I saw my Aunt Sheila shaking her head, clicking her tongue. I saw my cousin Marcus leaning over to whisper something to Tanisha, who was sitting next to Bernice, looking appropriately somber in a navy blue dress that covered her neck. Kyle was standing by the side of the stage, arms crossed, tapping his foot. He looked nervous. He kept checking his watch, scanning the back of the room. He didn't care about the sermon. He was waiting for the payday. I took a deep breath. I smoothed the lapels of my white suit. I had chosen white deliberately. In a sea of dark mourning clothes, I wanted to look like the light. I wanted to look clinical, precise, and unashamed. I adjusted my handbag, feeling the weight of the USB drive in the side pocket. It was lighter than a checkbook, but it carried so much more power. I pushed the doors open. The hinges squeaked a high-pitched sound that cut through my mother's monologue. Every head in the room turned. 50 pairs of eyes locked onto me. The silence was immediate and heavy. I walked down the center aisle. My heels clicked against the linoleum floor with a steady, rhythmic beat. I kept my head high, my face impassive. I did not look at the floor. I looked straight ahead at the crucifix hanging behind my mother. As I passed the rows of chairs, the whispers started. They were not quiet. They were meant to be heard. "Look at her," Aunt Sheila hissed loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "Wearing that expensive suit. Probably cost more than Bernice's car. She has no shame," another aunt muttered. "Walking in here like she owns the place after what she did to Tanisha." "Ungrateful," Uncle Robert grunted. "Kids these days forget where they came from." I felt their judgment like physical blows, but I let them bounce off me. These were people who had never asked me how I was doing. They had never celebrated my promotions. They only called when they needed money or to gossip. Their opinion of me was based on the fiction my mother had written, and I was about to burn the book. I reached the front of the room. Kyle stepped out to intercept me before I could get to the stairs. He blocked my path, forcing me to stop. He leaned in close, invading my personal space. He smelled of breath mints and anxiety. "You are late," he whispered, his voice tight. "Do you have it?" I looked at him. His eyes were darting around, terrified that I might say something loud. "Do you have the money, Jasmine?" he hissed again. "Cashier's check or wire transfer? Tell me you brought the deed too." I stepped around him without saying a word. I didn't even acknowledge his existence. It was the ultimate insult, and I saw his face flush with anger, but he couldn't grab me. Not here. Not in front of the Reverend. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. My mother stopped speaking. She looked at me with a mix of fear and triumph. She thought I was coming to surrender. She thought the white suit was a flag of truce. "Jasmine," she said into the microphone, her voice dripping with fake honey, "you came. Praise God. Come here, daughter. Come make things right with your family." She opened her arms, expecting a hug, expecting a public apology. She wanted me to kneel. She wanted me to hand over the check so she could wave it in the air and tell everyone that her prayers had been answered. I walked past her outstretched arms. I walked past the podium. I walked straight to the small table in the corner of the stage where the church's audiovisual laptop was set up. It was connected to the large projector screen that hung above the choir stand. Usually it was used to display hymn lyrics or Bible verses. Today it was going to display the truth. The room went confused. The whispers grew louder. "What is she doing?" Tanisha asked, standing up. "Jasmine," my mother said, her voice sharpening. "The offering plate is over here." I ignored them. I opened my bag. I didn't pull out a checkbook. I didn't pull out a deed. I pulled out a small silver USB drive. I plugged it into the laptop. The screen above us flickered to life. A blue square appeared, indicating a new device was connected. Kyle realized it first. He took a step forward, panic erupting on his face. "No," he shouted. "Stop her!" But it was too late. I had already opened the file. I turned to face the congregation. I picked up the handheld microphone from the table. "You all came here to witness a payment," I said, my voice calm and amplified, filling every corner of the hall. "You came to see me pay what I owe." I looked at my mother. She was staring at the screen behind me, her face draining of color. "My mother says I owe her for the cost of raising me," I continued. "She sent me a bill for $257,000. She told you all that I am a thief, that I am ungrateful, that I abandoned her." I pressed the spacebar on the laptop. The first image appeared on the giant screen. It was not a hymn. It was a scanned document, a bank statement from 14 years ago. "So today," I said, looking directly at the Reverend, "I am going to show you exactly where the money went. Let us call this the opening statement." The room fell deadly silent. The kind of silence that happens right before a bomb goes off. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. Kyle froze halfway up the stairs, and then I clicked to the next slide. The hum of the projector fan was the only sound in the room for a split second before the image sharpened into focus. It was huge, projected 10 feet tall against the white wall behind the pulpit. It was not a check. It was not a Bible verse. It was a bank statement from the First National City Bank, dated September 14, 2010. The font was old. The scan was slightly grainy, but the numbers were black, bold, and undeniable. I stepped to the side of the screen, holding the microphone like a laser pointer. I didn't look at the audience. I looked at the data, treating the congregation of the First AME Church like a board of directors facing a hostile takeover. "Let us look at the financials," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "This document is the opening balance of the Jasmine Harris Educational Trust established by my grandfather, Theodore Harris." I pointed to the top line. The date of deposit was August 30th, 2010, 1 week before he passed away. And the amount deposited was exactly $257,450.22. A gasp rippled through the pews. It started in the front row with the church elders and spread backward like a wave. They recognized the number. It was the exact same number my mother had put on the invoice she had handed me at the restaurant. It was the number she had plastered all over social media. The number she claimed was the cost of my burden. I turned to face my mother. Bernice was sitting in her pew, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. She looked like a deer staring down the headlights of a semi-truck. "You told everyone that number was what I owed you," I said calmly. "But that number was what Grandpa left for me. It was my tuition. It was my start in life. It was my safety net." I clicked the remote in my hand. The slide changed. "Exhibit B," I announced. The screen now showed a withdrawal slip dated 3 weeks later. The handwriting on the slip was loopy and decorative. It was not my grandfather's shaky script. It was unmistakable. "Reason for withdrawal." I read aloud, pointing to the line on the screen. "Emergency medical expenses. Surgery for minor child." I looked out at the crowd. I scanned the faces of my aunts and uncles. I asked them a simple question. Does anyone here remember me having surgery when I was 18? Did anyone visit me in the hospital? Did anyone bring me flowers? The room was deadly silent. My Aunt Sheila shook her head slowly, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Bernice. No. I had never been sick. I had never had surgery. The lie was so blatant, so lazy, that seeing it projected in high definition felt like a physical slap. Bernice stood up. Her legs were shaking. "That is private," she shrieked, her voice shrill and desperate. "You have no right to show family business in the house of God. Turn it off." "Kyle, make her turn it off." Kyle didn't move. He was staring at the screen, realizing that his blackmail leverage was currently being broadcast to 50 witnesses. He looked sick. I didn't turn it off. I clicked the remote again. "My mother claimed she withdrew the money for my health." I continued, my voice relentless. But in my line of work, we follow the money. We don't listen to stories, we look at the transaction codes. The third slide appeared. It was a split screen. On the left was the withdrawal of the trust funds. On the right were two invoices from the very next day. The first invoice was from a luxury car dealership. A brand new 2010 Mercedes-Benz E-Class, cash payment. The buyer was listed as Bernice Harris. The second invoice was from a clinic in Miami, the Elite Aesthetic Center. The procedure listed was a tummy tuck and breast augmentation. Patient name, Bernice Harris. The reaction in the church was instantaneous and explosive. It wasn't just a gasp this time, it was an uproar. "Oh my lord," shouted Mrs. Gable from the choir stand. "She bought a new chest with the baby's school money." "Heifer," someone else yelled from the back. The solemn atmosphere of the church evaporated. It was replaced by the chaotic energy of a scandal breaking in real time. People were standing up, craning their necks to read the invoices. Phones were out. The live stream was running. Bernice's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of gray and purple. She looked at the screen, seeing her vanity itemized and exposed. She had spent my future on a car that was likely in a junkyard by now, and plastic surgery that she had bragged about as good genes. "It is a lie," Bernice screamed, stumbling out into the aisle. She pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "That is Photoshop. She made it up. She is a computer genius. She faked it all to embarrass me. Do not believe her. I am a good mother. I sacrificed everything." She turned to the Reverend, grabbing his arm. "Reverend Miller, tell her to stop. This is demonic. She is possessed." Reverend Miller gently removed her hand from his arm. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at Bernice. His expression was not one of comfort. It was one of profound disappointment. "Bernice," he said softly, his voice amplified by his lapel mic. "These are bank records. They are fake." Bernice yelled, her voice breaking into a sob. "She is lying. There was no trust fund. Her grandfather died. Broke. Ask anyone. Ask Kyle." She spun around looking for support, but Kyle was slowly backing away toward the side exit, trying to make himself invisible. Tanisha was sitting with her head in her hands, realizing that the family money she thought she was entitled to was actually stolen goods. I watched my mother unravel. It was ugly. It was pathetic. But it was necessary. She was still clinging to the lie even when the truth was 10 feet tall behind me. She was banking on the fact that Grandpa was dead and couldn't defend himself. She thought that if she screamed loud enough, she could drown out the evidence. I spoke into the microphone one last time. "You say it is fake, Mother," I said. "You say Grandpa died broke. You say there is no one who can verify these documents because the only other person who knew about the trust is in a grave." Bernice glared at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Yes, he is dead. You can't prove anything. It is your word against mine." I shook my head slowly. "Actually," I said, "there was one other person who signed as a witness on the original trust formation. One other person whose name is on the deed to the house you are currently losing." I stepped down from the pulpit. The crowd parted for me. I raised my arm and pointed a steady finger toward the double doors at the back of the sanctuary. "If you think I am lying, Mother, why don't you explain it to the real head of this family?" All heads turned to the back of the room. The double doors swung open with a bang. Framed in the sunlight of the doorway was a wheelchair, and sitting in it, dressed in her Sunday best with a hat adorned with a single sharp pheasant feather, was Grandma V. She wasn't smiling. She looked like a judge arriving to deliver a death sentence. Beside her stood two uniformed police officers and a man in a sharp gray suit whom everyone recognized as the toughest litigator in the city. Bernice stopped screaming. Her knees gave out and she collapsed onto the red carpet of the aisle. The room went silent again, but this time it was the silence of judgment. The witness had arrived. The double doors of the sanctuary remained open, allowing a beam of sharp afternoon sunlight to cut through the dusty air of the church. It illuminated my grandmother like a spotlight from heaven. She did not look like an invalid. She sat in her motorized wheelchair with her spine rigid against the leather, backing her hands resting calmly on the armrests. Flanking her were two uniformed police officers and Mr. Henderson, whose gray suit looked even more formidable in this setting. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the babies in the back row seemed to stop crying. Bernice was still on her knees in the aisle, her face streaked with mascara, staring at her mother as if she were seeing a ghost. "Mother," Bernice whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here? You are supposed to be in bed." Grandma V did not answer immediately. She steered her chair forward, the electric motor humming softly on the carpet. The police officers walked in step with her, their hands resting near their belts. She stopped the chair exactly 3 feet from where Bernice was kneeling. She looked down at her daughter, not with pity, but with the cold, hard judgment of a matriarch who had seen enough. "I am here because you summoned the family," Bernice Grandma said. Her voice was not loud, but it projected to the back of the room without a microphone. "You wanted a family meeting. You wanted to discuss debts and obligations. So here I am." Bernice scrambled to her feet, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. She smoothed her dress, forcing a wobbly smile. "Yes. Yes, of course. I just wanted everyone to know the truth about Jasmine. She is attacking us, Mother. She is showing fake documents. Tell them. Tell them I have been a good daughter to you." Grandma V let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like dry leaves being crushed. "A good daughter. You left me in that nursing home for 6 months without a single visit. You only called the nurses to ask if I was dead yet, so you could read the will." The congregation gasped. The murmurs started again, louder this time. Bernice turned pale. "That is not true. I was busy. I was taking care of the estate." "The estate," Grandma repeated, savoring the word. "You mean my house, the house you live in. The house you have mortgaged 3 times without my permission." Bernice froze. She looked at the lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who was pulling a thick document from his briefcase. "You told everyone that house was yours." Bernice Grandma continued, her voice rising with authority. "You told people I signed it over to you years ago, but you forgot one thing. I never signed the deed. I gave you power of attorney, yes. But I kept the title. That house belongs to me." And the power of attorney document had a clause. Clause 14, the moral turpitude clause. Mr. Henderson stepped forward and adjusted his glasses. He read from the document in a dry, legal monotone. "In the event that the agent engages in criminal activity, fraud, or actions that bring public disgrace to the family name, all powers granted herein are immediately revoked and residency privileges are terminated, effective immediately." Bernice began to shake. Her hands were trembling so hard, her bracelets rattled. "Criminal activity," she sputtered. "I haven't done anything." Grandma pointed a gnarled finger at the screen behind me, where the forged bank withdrawal slip was still projected 10 feet tall. "You stole from your own child," Grandma said. "You forged your dead father's signature. That is a crime, Bernice. And because of that, as of this moment, you are homeless. I am evicting you. You have 24 hours to remove your personal effects from my property. After that, the locks will be changed." "No!" Bernice shrieked, grabbing her hair. "You can't do that. I am your daughter. Where will I go?" "That is not my concern," Grandma said coldly. "Perhaps you can live in that Mercedes you bought with Jasmine's tuition money." "Oh, wait. That was repossessed yesterday, wasn't it?" Before Bernice could scream again, one of the police officers stepped forward. He bypassed Bernice and walked straight toward the side of the stage where Kyle was trying to blend into the choir curtains. "Kyle Jenkins," the officer asked. Kyle jumped. He looked for a way to run, but the side exit was blocked by a deacon who had realized the tide had turned. "No," Kyle stammered. "I mean, yes. But I am just an observer here. This is a family dispute." The officer pulled a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. "We have a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Jenkins. Charges of wire fraud, corporate embezzlement from Apex Logistics, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. We have the audio recordings. and the digital paper trail provided by Ms. Harris. Kyle's face went white. He looked at me. I stood on the stage watching him with crossed arms. Jasmine, he yelled, desperation cracking his voice. Tell them, it was a joke. I was just joking on that tape. You have the right to remain silent, the officer recited, spinning Kyle around and slamming him against the wall to cuff him. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the church. Tanisha screamed. It was a high, piercing sound. She watched her husband being manhandled by the police. She looked at her mother, who was sobbing on the floor. She looked at the crowd, who were now filming everything with their phones. The second officer approached Bernice. Mrs. Harris, he said firmly, we also need you to come down to the station for questioning regarding the forgery of trust documents and identity theft. Bernice looked up at the officer, her eyes wild. You are arresting me in church. You are not above the law, ma'am, the officer said, helping her up, not gently. As the chaos swirled, Bernice wailing, Kyle shouting legal threats that made no sense. Grandma V cleared her throat. She raised her hand, and despite the noise, people quieted down to hear her final judgment. Mr. Henderson, she said, read the new will. The lawyer opened a fresh folder. He spoke clearly. Effective this morning, Vivian Harris has updated her last will and testament. All previous beneficiaries are removed. The entire estate, including the residential property, the commercial holdings, and the plot of land located in the Azure Corridor Development Zone, currently valued at $5.2 million, is transferred into a sole proprietorship trust. He paused for effect. The sole trustee and beneficiary is Jasmine Harris. $5 million. The number hung in the air. Tanisha's head snapped up. She looked at me. She looked at the land she had tried to force me to sell for pennies. She realized in that second that I was not just rich. I was the owner of their entire world. The police began to lead Bernice and Kyle out of the sanctuary. The walk of shame was long. Bernice tried to hide her face, but there was nowhere to hide. Wait. The voice came from the front pew. It was Tanisha. She ran into the aisle, but she didn't run to her mother. She didn't run to her husband. She ran to the stage. She ran to me. She threw herself down at the bottom of the steps. She grabbed the hem of my white pantsuit. She was crying, but these weren't the fake tears she used for her followers. These were tears of pure terror. Jasmine, please, she sobbed, looking up at me with mascara running down her chin. You can't let them take everything. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. I looked down at her. She was gripping my leg like a drowning rat climbing onto a piece of driftwood. It was Kyle. Tanisha babbled, her words tumbling over each other. He forced me to go along with it. He told me he would leave me if I didn't help him. And Mom told me that money was ours. She lied to me too. Jasmine, I am a victim here. I am your little sister. Please, you have $5 million now. You can't leave me with nothing. I watched her throw her husband and mother under the bus without a second of hesitation. It was pathetic. It was disgusting. And it was exactly who she was. I gently but firmly pulled my leg away from her grasp. I took a step back. I looked at the USB drive still plugged into the laptop. I looked at Grandma V, who gave me a slow, proud nod. Tanisha, I said, my voice amplified one last time by the microphone. You are not a victim. You are an accomplice. And the only reason you are crying is because you realized you bet on the wrong horse. I turned my back on her. I walked over to my grandmother. Ready to go, Grandma? I asked. Grandma V smiled. I think we have done the Lord's work today, child. Let us go get some ice cream. I took the handles of her wheelchair. I pushed her down the center aisle, following the police officers who were dragging my mother and brother-in-law out the doors. I walked past Tanisha, who was still kneeling on the floor, weeping into the empty air. I walked past the stunned relatives who were too shocked to speak. I walked out into the sunlight, leaving the darkness behind me for good. The fabric of my white pantsuit was damp where Tanisha was clutching my leg. Her fingernails dug into the material, desperate and clawing, ruining the clean lines of the outfit I had chosen specifically for this moment. I looked down at the top of her head. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was a mess. She was sobbing, begging, making promises she had no intention of keeping. "Please, Jasmine," she wailed, her voice echoing off the high church ceilings. "You can't leave me like this. I have nowhere to go." They took the car. They froze the accounts. "I don't know how to work a regular job. I am your sister." My sister. The word triggered a memory so sharp it almost made me wince. I was suddenly 12 years old again. We were at the top of the stairs in the old house. I was holding my science fair project, a delicate model of the solar system I had spent weeks building. Tanisha, then 9 years old and angry that I was getting attention, had walked up to me. She didn't look angry. She smiled that sweet, angelic smile that fooled everyone. Then she shoved me. Hard. I remembered the weightlessness, the terrifying tumble, the snap of my wrist as I hit the bottom landing. My project was crushed. When my parents came running, Tanisha had started crying instantly. She told them I tripped. She told them I was clumsy. Bernice had scolded me for not being careful, for scaring my little sister, and for breaking the plaster on the wall. Tanisha had stood behind Bernice's legs, smirking at me while I cradled my broken arm. I looked at the woman sobbing on the floor. The smirk was gone, replaced by terror, but the person was the same. She had spent her entire life pushing people downstairs and expecting them to apologize for the noise they made when they landed. I reached down and peeled her fingers off my leg one by one. I did not do it aggressively. I did it with the detachment of a doctor removing a leech. "Get up, Tanisha," I said. My voice was low, but in the silent church it sounded like a thunderclap. She scrambled to her feet, wiping her nose, looking at me with a glimmer of hope. "You will help me?" she asked, breathless. "You will talk to the lawyers?" I looked her in the eye. "I am not going to sue you, Tanisha. I am not going to send you to jail like your husband." "Oh, thank God," she breathed, reaching out to hug me. "Thank you, Jazz. I knew you loved me." I took a step back, letting her arms embrace empty air. "I am not finished," I said coldly. "I am not sending you to jail because you wouldn't survive it. But I am doing something that for you is far worse. I am cutting you off." Tanisha froze. "What?" "From this moment forward, you get nothing," I continued. "No allowance, no bailouts, no rent money, no using my name to get into clubs, no access to the trust fund. You are 29 years old, Tanisha. It is time you learned what the rest of us have known since we were children. Money is earned, not given." "But I can't," she shrieked, panic rising again. "I have debt, the lawsuits." "Then I suggest you get a job," I said. "I hear the grocery store is hiring. They pay minimum wage. It should be enough to rent a room somewhere." "You are ruining my life," she screamed, realizing the gravy train had truly derailed. "No," I replied. "I am letting you finally own your life. Good luck, Tanisha. You are going to need it." I turned away from her. Behind me, the police officers had finally managed to wrestle Kyle toward the exit. He was weeping openly now, shouting about plea deals and blaming his boss. But the main event was still happening in the aisle. 2 officers were escorting Bernice. She wasn't walking, she was being dragged, her heels skidding on the red carpet. She was fighting them with the ferocity of a cornered animal. When she saw me looking at her, she stopped struggling for a second. She locked eyes with me. The look on her face wasn't regret. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. "Jasmine," she screamed. Her voice cracked raw and ugly. "How dare you? I am your mother. I gave you life. I brought you into this world. I watched her. I felt nothing. The cord that had bound me to her guilt, the obligation, the need for approval had been severed the moment she handed me that invoice." "You are a demon!" Bernice yelled, spitting the words. "You are ungrateful trash. You are sending your own mother to prison over money, over a mistake. You will rot in hell for this. You owe me. You owe me everything." The officers pulled her forward, but I raised a hand. "Wait," I said. The officers paused. Bernice stood there panting, her chest heaving. She thought I was cracking. She thought the guilt was finally kicking in. A twisted smile touched her lips. See, she hissed. You can't do it. You can't do this to your mother. I walked up to her. I stood close enough to smell her expensive perfume, which now smelled like decay to me. I leaned in so only she in the front row could hear me. You keep talking about what I owe you, Mother, I said softly. You gave me an invoice. $257,000. You said that was the cost of our relationship. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive I had used for the presentation. I tucked it into the pocket of her blazer, right next to the handcuffs. I accepted your terms, I said. You are not my mother. You are a creditor. You are a bad investment that I have finally liquidated. And as of today, the debt is paid in full. We are even. We are done. I stepped back. Take her away, I told the officers. Bernice's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The realization hit her. I hadn't saved her. I had just closed her account. As the officers dragged her out the double doors, her screams started again, but they sounded distant like a ghost fading into the ether. The church was dead silent. The show was over. The villains were gone. I turned to leave, but suddenly the aisle was blocked. My Aunt Sheila, the same woman who had mocked my suit 20 minutes ago, stepped in front of me. Behind her were Uncle Robert and Cousin Marcus. Their faces had undergone a miraculous transformation. The judgment was gone, replaced by sickeningly sweet smiles. Jasmine baby Aunt Sheila cooed, reaching out to touch my arm. We had no idea. We really didn't. Bernice lied to all of us. I stepped back to avoid her touch. We are so proud of you, Uncle Robert chimed in, nodding vigorously. Standing up for truth like that. You know I always said you were the smart one. The special one. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, looking at his shoes. Yeah, Jazz. Listen about that text I sent earlier. I didn't mean it. Family is family, right? We stick together. I looked at them. I looked at the 50 faces in the room. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the woman who now controlled a $5 million estate. They were looking at their new bank. They were calculating how to spin this, how to get on my good side, how to ask for loans next week. I felt a wave of exhaustion, but it was a clean kind of tired. I didn't say a word to them. I didn't argue. I didn't accept their apologies. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. To engage with them would be to acknowledge that their opinion mattered. And it didn't. Not anymore. I simply walked through them. I walked past Aunt Sheila as if she were a piece of furniture. I walked past Uncle Robert as if he were invisible. I walked past Marcus without breaking stride. I reached the front of the church where Grandma V was waiting. She was watching me with a look of fierce pride. Are you ready? She asked. I released the brake on her wheelchair. Yes, Grandma. I am ready to go home. I pushed her chair down the center aisle. The wheels hummed softly on the carpet. We moved past the stunned congregation, past the weeping Tanisha, past the empty space where Bernice used to reign. We moved toward the open doors where the sunlight was pouring in. I stepped out onto the concrete steps of the church. The air outside tasted different. It didn't smell of old perfume and lies. It smelled of ozone and freedom. I helped Grandma into the passenger seat of my car, folded her wheelchair into the trunk, and got into the driver's seat. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. I saw the church doors closing. I saw the crowd inside, small and distorted by the distance. I turned the corner and they vanished. I drove toward the highway, toward the city, toward a future that finally truly belonged to me. The bill was paid, the ledger was closed, and for the first time in 32 years, I was free. The construction crews just finished pouring the concrete foundation for the Theodore Harris Community Center this morning. I stood on the edge of the property, the same land my family called a worthless swamp, watching the sunrise hit the wet cement. It shone like gold. This land, which was once the source of so much contention and greed, is now going to be a sanctuary. In a year, it will be a place where foster children can learn coding, financial literacy, and art. It will be a place where nobody is treated like an outsider. It is the legacy my grandfather deserved, built on the ground he fought to keep. It has been 6 months since the day I walked out of that church with my grandmother, leaving the wreckage of my biological family behind me. 6 months of silence. 6 months of peace. 6 months of therapy to untangle the knots of guilt they spent 30 years tying in my stomach. I drove past my childhood home yesterday. It had a sold sign on the lawn. The grass was overgrown and the windows were dark. The bank foreclosed on it 3 weeks after the church incident. It was strange to look at the structure that held so much of my trauma and feel absolutely nothing. It was just wood and brick. The ghosts didn't live there anymore. The ghosts were busy dealing with their own realities. My mother Bernice managed to avoid a prison sentence by pleading guilty to a lesser charge of fraud. Her age and lack of prior criminal record worked in her favor, but the judge was not lenient with her assets. She was ordered to pay full restitution to the estate. She lost the house. She lost the car. She lost her pension. Today, the woman who used to scream at waiters if her water wasn't chilled to the right temperature is working in the back of a diner on the outskirts of the city. I heard from a cousin that she is washing dishes. The irony is so precise it almost feels scripted. She spends her days scrubbing the remnants of other people's meals, invisible and humbled. She has tried to call me twice. I block the number both times. I don't wish her harm, but I will never give her the opportunity to harm me again. Kyle was not as fortunate. The federal justice system does not have a sense of humor about wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. He is currently serving the first year of a 3-year sentence at a medium-security facility. Tanisha divorced him the week after he was sentenced. She claimed she was a victim of his schemes, but the judge in the civil suits didn't buy it. Tanisha, my little sister, the golden child who never had to lift a finger. I went to the grocery store last Tuesday to pick up some chamomile tea for Grandma. I chose the lane with the longest line just to observe. Tanisha was scanning items wearing a green polyester vest that was 2 sizes too big. Her acrylic nails were gone. Her designer makeup was gone. She looked tired. She looked older. When she saw me, she froze, holding a carton of milk. For a second, I saw the old flash of entitlement in her eyes, the instinct to ask me to save her. But then she looked at my face, and she saw the wall I had built. She looked down and kept scanning. She is living in a studio apartment with 2 roommates taking the bus to work. It is a hard life. But for the first time in 29 years, it is an honest one. I drove home to the estate I bought with the proceeds from my investments. It is not flashy. It is tucked away in the hills, surrounded by oak trees and silence. I parked my car and walked around to the back garden. Grandma V was sitting at the patio table, a shawl draped over her shoulders, reading a mystery novel. Her wheelchair was parked beside her regular chair. She has been doing physical therapy and is getting stronger every day. The doctors say her stress levels are down and her heart is healthier than it has been in a decade. I sat down across from her. She poured me a cup of tea without asking how I took it. She knows. She has always known. "How is the building coming along?" she asked, marking her page in the book. "It is beautiful, Grandma," I said. "We are going to plant the garden next week." She nodded, looking out at the hydrangeas we had planted together. "You know your grandfather would have loved this. He never cared about the money, Jasmine. He cared about what the money could build. He cared about stability." I took a sip of tea. The warmth spread through my chest. For so long, I thought my stability depended on making my mother happy. I thought if I just paid enough bills, if I was just successful enough, if I just stayed quiet enough, they would finally love me. I spent my youth chasing a mirage in a desert. We sat there for an hour as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange. There was no drama. There was no screaming. There were no demands for money or passive-aggressive comments about my weight or my job. There was just the wind in the trees and the company of the one person who saw me when I was invisible. People love to say that family is everything. They print it on greeting cards and stitch it onto pillows. They use it as a weapon to keep you in line. They tell you that you have to forgive because of shared DNA. They tell you that you can't walk away from blood. But as I looked at my grandmother, I realized the truth. Family is not about whose blood runs in your veins. It is about whose hand holds yours when the world falls apart. Family are the people who protect you when you are vulnerable, not the ones who push you down the stairs to see if you will break. Family are the people who cheer for your success, not the ones who try to steal it to cover their own failures. I pulled out my phone one last time. I opened the banking app. The balance was high, but that wasn't what mattered. I scrolled down to the transaction history back to the day 6 months ago when I transferred the legal fees to start the lawsuit. My mother wanted me to pay for my existence. She sent me a bill for $257,000. She thought she was burdening me with a debt. She didn't realize she was handing me a receipt. I paid the bill. I paid it with my innocence. I paid it with my tears. I paid it with the years I spent trying to be good enough for people who were committed to misunderstanding me. But sitting here in this garden, free from their debts, free from their drama, and free from their expectations, I know one thing for sure. $257,000 was a bargain. It was the clearance sale of a lifetime. Because the price of my freedom, that is something money can't buy. And I would have paid double just to sit here, drink this tea, and finally breathe. This story teaches us a powerful truth: shared DNA is not a license for abuse. Jasmine's journey proves that true family is defined by mutual respect, not by transactional obligations or emotional manipulation. For years, she sought validation from people committed to misunderstanding her, only to realize that her freedom cost exactly $257,000, a price she was willing to pay. We learn that setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but an act of necessary survival. Your worth is never determined by how much you can give to those who drain you, but by how fiercely you protect your own peace. If you believe that dignity is non-negotiable, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. Share this video to remind someone that walking away is sometimes the bravest step you can take.